Welcome to Get Your Spirit in Shape, United Methodist Communications and UMC.org's podcast to help us keep our souls as healthy as our bodies. I'm Joe Iovino. My guest today is the Reverend Junius Dotson, who serves as the leader of Discipleship Ministries of the United Methodist Church.
Discipleship is, if you haven't figured out yet, is my passion.
Yeah. We talk about things you and I can do to more closely follow Jesus.
The spiritual disciplines form us. They grow our faith, they stretch our faith.
One of those disciplines is sharing our faith naturally and authentically.
If you are a teacher, then you're strategically located in the classroom.
Yeah.
If you are a lawyer, you're strategically located in a courtroom. If you are a doctor, in other words, there are natural places where you can grow and build relationships and just be open.
Another is prayer.
I'm praying when I'm listening to music. I'm praying when I'm driving my car. I'm praying when I'm washing the dishes. Prayer for me is just a continuous way of being.
And one more is worship.
There have been times that I've actually been running on the treadmill and I'm listening to gospel music and I just go into praise. I'm raising my hands and I'm, hey, praise God, yeah. That's the spiritual exercise. There's a double meaning to that.
Reverend Dotson's passion for discipleship is contagious. I'm in the studio today with the Reverend Junius Dotson, the leader of Discipleship Ministries of the United Methodist Church. Welcome, Junius.
Thank you so very much. I'm so excited to be here.
And we're really pleased to have you with us today. You are, as I said, the leader of Discipleship Ministries, and I want to spend a little bit of time today talking about what it means to be a disciple, because often people think, well, there were 12 of those a long time ago. How can I be a disciple today? In kind of simple, basic terms, how would you describe that? How can we be disciples today?
Well, I think in its most basic form, to be a disciple is to be a follower. It's to be a follower of Christ. And, if you are a follower of Christ, there are some characteristics that go along with being a disciple. Some of those characteristics are your growth. How are you growing in Christ? And the things that we do, habits that help form us spiritually. And these are spiritual disciplines like prayer. That's a spiritual discipline. Praying on a daily basis, I think, is important. Making worship a priority in your life, I believe, is an important piece of growing as a disciple. There are, in terms of sharing your gifts, and that means giving, giving to support the ministry and mission. That's an important piece because, basically what that says is that, number one, I'm grateful for the gifts that I've received, and all of my gifts come from God. But it also says that, I want to support this effort to reach other people, to reach new disciples. Yeah. And that's an important piece, I think, of our growth in Christ. And another piece I think is so crucial and vital is a willingness to share our faith. And that comes in a variety of forms, but God provides so many opportunities for us to share our faith. I call these, divine opportunities, divine moments, divine appointments. And I pray for divine appointments. It's like, every day, God show me the divine appointment. It's just an opportunity to engage someone who I would not have been able to engage previously. And I call these the providential moments from God.
Do you have an example of one that comes to mind, either for you or for someone that you've heard of?
Well, I can tell you, generally, I'm trying to think of the last divine appointment that I had. And when I go to restaurants, one of the things I like to do when I go to restaurants is get to know my server. Yeah. So I always ask, the name of the person who's serving. And then I would always also share with them that, hey, I'm going to be praying for my meal. And if I'm with somebody, I would say, hey, we're going to be praying for our meal. Is there something you would like for us to pray with you about? And you would be surprised how many people will open up and they'll share something deep that's going on in their life. Hey, would you pray for my mom? She's about to go through surgery. And then they will give you some history. And then all of a sudden you started this beginning of a new relationship. And this has been a regular part of my ministry, personal ministry. And I like to frequent the same place a lot so that I can get to know people. Yeah. And that's one of the ways that that happens. Then, of course, I travel a lot. So if I'm on an airplane, I'm sitting next to somebody, they'll start sharing their story. Those are divine appointments. So those are probably some very key ways that I meet new people.
Do you get a sense that those conversations aren't happening on a regular basis for people that aren't connected to the church? And so when you crack the door open just a little, I mean, they're ready to give you all kinds of things that are happening.
You would be surprised. I think so because, and it's amazing to me, Joe, that, when I'm in these conversations, how I'm not intentionally steering these conversations
Right.
to a spiritual nature, but they end up, we end up talking about God, or we end up talking about church, or we end up, all of those sort of things. And I usually try to have these conversations before somebody asks me, what do you do? Because sometimes when they say, well, what do you do? Well, I'm a pastor. Well, then it's like, oh, okay, conversation's over.
Yeah, things change.
Things change. But just as a normal person in a normal conversational exchange, and you'd be amazed at the depth of these conversations. And I think people are spiritually hungry. I think they are. I think people are hungry for the things of God, and they may not always articulate it or name it in that way, but the character of the conversation usually is around those sort of things.
It's an interesting way to approach it, too, because lots of times when we talk about the church word for years was evangelism. We talked about doing evangelism, and that felt really intimidating. But asking your server if there's anything I can pray for you seems a lot more inviting and a wonderful way to do much the same thing.
Absolutely. And I can tell you that at Discipleship Ministries, one of our ministry priorities is engagement with people who are currently outside the church. And we say a key to engagement is to developing relationships. Now, how do you develop relationships? How do you connect with people? And how do you engage in these relationships in a way that's authentic, that in other words, has a genuine, I like people. I generally want to get to know people. That's genuine, that is organic. And consistent. And by organic, I mean that, when you're in a relationship with somebody, things evolve and you grow. And I think in terms of helping people or offering Christ, if you will, I've discovered that when I'm in a relationship with somebody, and I go back to the restaurant example, I have so many stories of restaurant example, but that there are natural times when I'm able to share my faith. And I'm on this day, I'm going to share my faith, and I'm not beating people upside the head with the Bible. It's just we're in relationship with each other. You may be going through something, and that's the opportunity for me to either pray with you or to say, hey, my church has a support group that can help you move through this, or hey, the pastor's preaching a series on grief, or the pastor's preaching a series on relationship. You may want to come check that out. So those are just natural opportunities to be able to share in that way.
Yeah. And it's something that, as we talk about discipleship or followers of Jesus, this was the way Jesus related to people too. I mean, it's really similar. When you think about the story that's popping in my mind right now is the woman at the well.
Yes.
It's a normal, everyday occurrence.
Everyday
and
interaction.
he just chooses to have a surprising conversation, but he chooses just to have an everyday kind of conversation with her.
I like to say in the historical sense of the word, discipleship, I like to say that we are strategically placed. That first and foremost, last and utmost, we're always disciples of Christ. We're followers of Christ. If you are a teacher, then you're strategically located in the classroom.
Yeah.
If you are a lawyer, you're strategically located in a courtroom. If you are a doctor, in other words, there are natural spheres of influence or natural places where you can grow and build relationships and just be open. Just be open to those organic opportunities to be able to share your faith or to be able to share a wonderful faith formation opportunity that somebody may be interested in. I think what we can't do is compartmentalize our faith. And,
meaning this is my church world and
exactly,
this is my work world.
Exactly.
Okay.
I think they're all integrated. And I think as you live as a follower of Christ, you're there everywhere you are.
Yeah.
You are a follower of Christ. One of the most surprising things for me was when I pastored St. Mark in Wichita. I served as a commissioner on the Kansas State Sentencing Commission. And I was appointed by the governor to serve on this commission. And when I went into the room, everybody had name plaques, right? And so, of course, my name plaque said Reverend Junius Dotson, right? Okay, wonderful, good, But you'd be surprised at how many meetings, gatherings, when we did retreats, meals, those sort of things where people invited spiritual guidance. They invited spiritual direction. They invited me into that world. And I wasn't appointed simply because I was a pastor. I was appointed because I was a community leader. But I was pleasantly surprised at how many of those representatives, and there were lawyers and judges on this commission, who were genuinely interested in things of faith. They were generally interested in the faith community. And these were things that they really had a deep desire to know more about.
And so when we're open in the other spheres of our life, we have opportunity to have these conversations. That's kind of what I hear you saying.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes we're sometimes reticent, or sometimes we're afraid. Hey, nobody's going to want to hear this,
Right.
or I don't want to pray, or whatever the case would be. And what I discover more and more is that the opposite is true. That I think people are wanting us to be our true, authentic selves, as followers of Christ. Right?
Let's talk about another one of those that you brought up as a path of discipleship, or an element of discipleship is probably better said. Let's talk about prayer, because we've kind of been touching around that a little bit. You say prayer is a very important part of your life every single day.
Yes, prayer for me is foundational. It centers me. It provides direction. I get a sense of peace. That peace that surpasses all understanding. When I'm making a major decision, when I feel like it's the right decision, is when I feel that sense of peace. Prayer gives me the opportunity to give things to God, things that I would ordinarily worry about, or things that maybe, I take responsibility that maybe doesn't belong to me.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Those sort of things where I think prayer is a very important part of my life personally.
How would you coach somebody who is struggling with that aspect? Prayer, for some people, is hard to wrap their arms around. What are some tips that you would give someone who's saying, I'm having trouble finding meaning in my prayer life?
I think variety. I think there are several ways to be in prayer. And I think typically when we think about prayer, you think, okay, I'm going to close my eyes, I'm going to fold my hands, I'm going to, and then this is a very designated time for prayer.
Yes.
I think about prayer as continuous. So it's not just one time when I'm on the floor or on my knees praying to God, but it's continuous. I'm praying. Look, I'm praying when I'm listening to music. I'm praying when I'm driving my car. I'm praying when I'm washing the dishes. I'm praying when I'm saying grace at a meal, and I'm praying for people in the restaurant. I mean, prayer for me is just a continuous way of being. And so in quiet time, and in quiet time, as I said, prayer is not always you saying things. Sometimes prayer is listening. Prayer is listening for God and trying to hear the voice of God. And I think that's a very important part. So I think thinking about prayer is continuous, thinking about the variety of ways in which we can pray. Sometimes I journal. That's a form of prayer for me, to sit down and write and to reflect on things. That definitely is a form of prayer for me. And also, I think one of the simplest things, but I found this to be very helpful, is to pray the scripture, especially the Psalms, and to turn to a psalm and just to pray through it, to make it your prayer or my prayer for the day, and to kind of live out of that.
We're almost using the psalm as an outline. Is that
absolutely
how you see that? Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
When you talk about praying kind of continuously all the time, what I heard you say, and I want to check this out with you, what I think I heard you say was, it's an awareness, right? It's an awareness of the Spirit of God kind of in this space,
Yes.
but also an awareness of, I heard you say, those around you, the things that are going on in the people's lives around you. So it's this, not describing this well. Can you help me?
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. It is a sense of awareness. One of our initiatives at Discipleship Ministries is to see all the people.
Right.
And part of seeing all the people is singing.
Yeah.
And I believe that singing is dialogue.
Yeah.
And it's certainly the beginning of being and wanting to be in a relationship with someone. And so having an awareness of the people that are around you, also having an awareness that, you may be having a bad day, but that person could be having a bad day too,
Yeah.
And having a desire to, again, I'm going to go back to, I love to engage people, so I'll talk to anybody. But I also discover, Joe, that people talk to me.
Right.
And I think part of that is because of having an acute sense of awareness and being approachable.
Yeah.
And knowing that, sometimes people just want to talk, want a friendly hug or hi or hey, how you doing? That kind of thing. But just amazing things happen.
Yeah, you're far more outgoing than I am. Right? I can sense that just in this little bit of conversation. And I actually am less. It's not as easy for me to kind of approach someone that I don't know to talk to. But one of the things that I've found as a quieter person is that people like to talk to me because I'm going to listen. And it's just this weird sense that people seem to have. You ask that little question, and suddenly there's a whole flow coming your way. So there's lots of ways we can do this, and you don't have to be a pastor to do it. We can just be aware of the people around us prayerfully and have these meaningful conversations.
You know, one of the biggest examples of that, there's a certain airline that I fly from time to time where the seats are not assigned.
Oh, yeah.
And so you sit, and I'm always amazed that you're walking on the airplane, and it's clear when somebody doesn't want you to sit next to them. Mm-hmm. Either they won't make eye contact with you, or they'll start fidgeting, or those sort of things. And I just think that's one of those perfect examples of being in a different kind of space. Where you're open. Hey, how you doing? Hey, take this seat if you like. That sort of thing. That's a sense of that piece of awareness of being approachable. And even if you're a quiet person or an introvert, there's still ways that we can see all the people and be in dialogue with people without having to be extroverted personalities.
Yeah, you have to initiate the conversation necessarily to be a welcoming person. Right. So we've talked a little bit about sharing our story. I like that a lot. We've talked all about prayer. Let's spend a few minutes talking about worship, because one of the other things you brought up was being a part of a worship service. Yes. Tell me how that's part of our discipleship.
Well, I think all roads lead to worship. I think disciples are followers of Christ. They're worshipers. We worship Christ. I think there is a corporate worship where we gather together as the body of Christ, and part of that is this time of celebration. We're celebrating the presence of God. I mean, everybody's awesome. God is awesome, and we're lifting up and loving on God, and we're allowing ourselves to experience the presence of God in our lives, and personally and in a corporate sense. That's the kind of corporate worship of God. And I think it's a very, very important piece of our walk. That's a very important piece of this journey that we're on. It feeds us, but it also empowers us to be able to feed others. It empowers us for the journey ahead. And so I think that's a very important piece. And then there's private worship. And I believe that followers and disciples of Christ can't wait to just Sunday to worship God. They can't just wait for the corporate gathering to worship God. That you have to be intentional about having some individual private worship time with God. And so, of course, there are many ways to do that, many settings to be able to do that. But I think that's an important piece of our growth, this piece of worship.
Yeah, just taking that, you talked about quiet time earlier, that can be our worship time.
Absolutely.
Of our personal worship. And that kind of leads me in a way to, we've been talking about these things that are about how we are shaped by God in those quiet times. But also you talked about our gifts and the ways that we can use our gifts, including our financial gifts, to be disciples. And we don't often think of it that way as a discipleship piece. So help me with that. Tell me a little bit about using our gifts to be a disciple of Jesus Christ.
Well, I think we're talking about stewardship. And when I think about giving, I think about giving as I call it a spiritual discipline, because spiritual disciplines form us. They grow our faith. They stretch our faith. And so giving as a spiritual discipline out of the heart, first and foremost, is the acknowledgement that everything I have comes from God, that God gives me the ability, this is somewhere in Deuteronomy, gives me the ability to create wealth. Right. And by that, I don't mean being a rich person, but the ability to engage in commerce, the ability to have financial means, whatever the level of financial, like every gift comes from God. Yes. And so it's an acknowledgement of that. No matter how large or how small, the gift comes from God. And so giving first and foremost is the acknowledgement that if it were not for God, I wouldn't have it to give in the first place. Right. And so as I give, then I'm growing deeper, right, in my understanding of that. And my sense of gratitude is enlarged. So that's a very important piece for me. The other aspect of this for me is what giving means to support the ministry and the mission. Right. If I were in a local church, I say of this local house, or the ministry and mission of this church. Right. And the beauty, of course, of being the United Methodist Church is that we have the ability to be able to support ministry and mission beyond ourselves, beyond the local church, and have significant impact,
Yes.
on the lives of others. And, this is so that people who don't know Christ can come to know Christ, that for the people who are yet to come, right? So we have the ability to do that. And so giving is a very, very important piece then of what it means to be a disciple, because we want other people to come to know Jesus. We want other people to be followers of Christ. And we want this movement of Christ to continue to grow and to have impact beyond ourselves.
Wonderful. Wonderful. We've been talking about discipleship and how you are the leader of Discipleship Ministries. I want to learn a little bit more about you for a second. So tell me about your job and the way you see what you're doing at Discipleship Ministry.
Well, first off, discipleship is, if you haven't figured it out yet, is my passion.
Yeah.
And I've always been so passionate about discipleship. And so part of my job at Discipleship Ministries is to inspire a disciple-making movement.
You're doing a pretty good job there.
Thank you so very much. Yeah, across our denomination. Our mission is to assist, local church leaders, annual conference leaders in their task of making disciples.
Sure.
That's our mission. We equip world-changing disciples, and that, through training and resourcing, and those two significant ways that we do that. Leadership training is a piece of it. We work with young people. Path One, we try to inspire this movement for starting new churches. Yeah. Why do we start new churches? To reach new people. Yeah. And I'm a church planter. I planted a church in California, planted a second campus in my time in Wichita. The greatest joy for me in starting churches was seeing new people come to Christ. There is nothing like seeing a person who didn't have a relationship with Christ come to know Jesus, and the joy, it's like a light turns on, and they are just so full of enthusiasm and full of energy, and they want to take on the world. That's the greatest. I get no greater joy than that. And so that's part of what we're trying to do, discipleship ministry, not only for new churches, but for existing congregations. Absolutely. It's about rediscovering that why and living out of it. This is why we're here. We're here to reach people for Christ. We're here to make disciples, and we're here to transform the world.
Yeah, I was just going to do the same thing that the United Methodist Church says. Our goal is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world.
Absolutely.
And you're on the front lines of trying to help make that happen.
Absolutely.
For us. On Get Your Spirit in Shape, we talk about the spiritual nutrition as the things that we talk about and kind of these ideas about discipleship. But we also like to talk about spiritual exercises and ways in which we can grow and exercise our faith and be disciples of Jesus Christ. In your life, and you've already shared some of them, but I'm going to ask you directly because we just do this with every guest. Sure. What is something that you would recommend that we try, maybe something that we haven't tried before, that would help us in our discipleship?
Well, for me, one of the most meaningful practices for me, I love music. And so I do a couple of things, particularly in the mornings. I tell that little machine that I talk to, and she'll start playing music for me. Hey, play some modern gospel. And I turn it up, and I just allow that music to minister to me. And man, nothing changes my mood quicker. Nothing gets me going quicker than, that piece. And depending on what song it is, I'll crank it up a little bit. So that's important for me. Here's the other thing I do. I work out, I go to the gym, and I love, put my headphones on, and I'm listening to gospel music. And there have been times that I've actually been running on the treadmill, and I'm listening to gospel music, and I just go into praise. I'm raising my hands, and I'm, hey, praise God, yeah. That's a spiritual exercise. There's a double meaning to that. But those are two things that are just meaningful for me. A very, very important piece for me. I love doing those things. I love finding spiritual themes or looking for God, spiritual meaning in television shows or movies, and then having conversations, with people about that. There'll be a phrase that's said on a show or something that I'll write down, and I've done this with my staff, actually. I'll write it down and say, hey, let me tell you about this thing I saw last night, and it takes you deeper into exploring different aspects of faith. So,
sure. Yeah. I love the music thing. I think that's a great And it takes absolutely zero talent to have to be able to turn on
Zero.
and listen to the music. It's great. Are you a singer? I'm just curious.
I love to sing,
I was gonna say, you have a great speaking voice. So I was like,
but I am not a singer. Okay.
okay.
Usually my music team would say, "Oh, we need you to sit down." Okay. But listen, when I'm in praise mode, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to open my mouth and make a joyful noise unto the Lord.
Thanks, Junius. This has been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed this.
Thank you so very much, and I appreciate the conversation, and God bless you as you seek to keep inspiring disciple making.
That was the Reverend Junius Dotson, leader of Discipleship Ministries of the United Methodist Church. To learn more about Junius and Discipleship Ministries, or to find other great United Methodist podcasts, visit umc.org/podcasts and look for this episode. Also, we'd love it if you would take the time to review Get Your Spirit in Shape on iTunes or just give us some stars. Great reviews help more people find us. Thanks for listening, downloading, and subscribing. I'll be back soon with another conversation to help us keep our souls as healthy as our bodies. I'm Joe Iovino. Peace.